Hello, welcome to Cerulean Arts Gallery. Tonight we're speaking with Keith Leitner in conjunction with his Cerulean Arts Collective Exhibition, which is on now through May the 4th. Hello, Keith.
Hello,
Thanks for being here tonight.
my pleasure.
So please tell us a bit about yourself and the new show.
Uh, I'm an artist. I'm a teacher and a painter. Um, and the work you have there at the show is a year's worth of work. Um, uh, and it's several different places I go to. There's actually some still lives, which I teach still life, and I include some still life in this show, um, which I've never done before. But I've teaching still life. I've learned to appreciate it a great deal more than I once did. And The landscape, the one that Tina is showing you right now, that's from over the summer in Massachusetts, a little town called Menemsha, that we were staying at. Um,
And these are all watercolors, right?
they're all watercolor. Yeah, there's no oil this time around. They're all watercolor. I had some oils in the process, but they were taking way too long. So you're getting all watercolor this time around.
And you do them on the spot, right?
Yeah, they're all alla prima, plein air. Even the still lives, they're one shot. I don't spend. I rarely go back into them. Once in a blue moon, I'll go back into them once I get them home. But yeah, what you see is what you get. And I do that for a reason. I don't want to spend too much time. I like the immediacy and the kind of give and take when you're in front of what you're painting. And uh, It's a challenge. I just like the result. I think if you have spend too much time, if you have too much time in your hands with a painting, you can overwork it, especially with watercolor. Um, and I don't want to do that. I want to take my time, or I want to do it and not take my time, I should say, and see what I get. And I don't know how these things are ever going to turn out. And that's purposeful. I mean, I sit down, I look at something, but I don't sit there and say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I kind of jump in feet first, and what you see is what you get, for better or for worse.
Do they all work out?
No, no, I've got, what's one of the challenges. You just gotta keep moving. Sometimes paintings go south, and so be it. I tell my students all the time, you go to a gallery, you see a show like this, you don't see the piles of stuff in the studio that the artist doesn't want you to see. Um, and if you turn these paintings over, there's paintings in the back of them. If a painting goes south, I just turn it over and paint the other side. One, because paper costs money, and two, I don't want to waste it. So, uh, you just keep moving. Things don't always work out, but every time you paint, you're going to learn something. So even if when something fails, you just figure out why it failed and you try not to do it again.
So how do you pick your locations?
It's something that I just strikes me that I might challenge me, or something I enjoy. Viewpoint, that painting that Tina's looking at right now. That's one of the. It's called the Lodges at Swarthmore College. It's a dormitory from the 1920s, and I've always loved that building. It's a really nice building, and I just wanted to paint it. Um, I don't do a lot of architecture, but when I do, I still enjoy it because I studied architecture and I still enjoy looking at it. Um, but I tend not to spend too much time with architecture because I tend to belabor it and tend to get really tight. So I don't do it that often. And
So
that's
your
also,
background is in architecture, so how did you come to painting?
uh, well, I studied architecture, at Temple, and Liz Wilson was my instructor years ago, over 30 years ago. And I learned a lot from her, actually. And then, I didn't follow up with architecture, which I'm happy about. And went back to school for fine arts, and everything that Liz taught me, uh, in architecture, in the first 2 years, was design basics, came in handy, really handy. And I just decided to go back to school uh, after 17 years.
To Academy, right?
Yeah, I went to the academy and
Pennsylvania Academy.
the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, which was uh, I did the post back and the MFA, so I was there for 3 years. It was over far way too fast, but I learned a great deal. I'm very grateful for that time there and the ability to go there and to learn from the people who taught there. Bruce Engelson, Renee Felks, Joe Rapinski, Nisa Grassi, I could go on and on. They were all stellar. Jan Baltzell, they were all stellar instructors. I learned so much from all of them. Um, I'm really, it was a privilege to have them, come in and look at my work and give feedback, because they were all so supportive uh, and they're all so phenomenal in what they do that I really lucked out going there when I did, being able to learn from them. It was a big deal.
And you were working primarily abstractly there, right?
Yeah, and I still do. And actually, these are all I think these are pretty abstract too. Non-objectively, when I was at school, I wanted to wrap my head around non-objective painting because I liked it, I enjoyed it, I wanted to know what it was all about. So I spent a great deal of time, d diving deeper into because I came in as a landscape painter, and what does that mean? And I kind of during my time at PATH, I've managed to chew on it and read and pull up my books and figure out what this was behind landscape and nature and all these good things that I talk about. And it was very helpful. And while I was working on objectively, I learned a great appreciation of material, be it oil, watercolor, anything. I learned to let material speak in the work. It's not all about an image. There's material involved. I'm coming back to watercolor after all those years. Uh, it was a different ball game completely. Um, uh, just my color got better, the application got better, it was freer. Um, and uh, yeah, so I still work not objectively, uh, but you tend to do that in oil, and it takes a very long time the way I work. So um, I tried working abstractly with watercolor, but I didn't like the results. It was a little too, it always came out with all this depth to it, and it wasn't quite what I was looking for. So, um, but I managed to do something with it in these paintings, I think. This
Well,
painting,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, this painting is looking at right now is one of the still lives, um, uh, uh, that I included. Like I said, I really started to appreciate still life. I use it to teach. Um, but I've really grown to love it. Like this, and there's a lot behind it. You're not just, I tell people all the time, you're not just throwing pots and pans on a table and painting it. There's a process. You're looking at shape, you're looking at positive negative space. You're looking at a great deal of color in the arrangements that you set up. And I get that from looking at Eileen Goodman. Her amazing still lives are so color focused. Not only are they beautiful watercolor and they're descriptive, her sense of color is so amazing, that I try and show that in these as well.
Yeah, color seems particularly important also in your teaching to
Yeah, yeah, it's crucial. I think it's crucial that whether it's landscape or still life, the students have to understand how color works. You're not just picking colors off a palette and putting them in paper. They interact on the surface of the painting. They mix certain ways. And I think that's crucial if you're going to be a painter to know the basic fundamentals of color. Um, and I learned that at PAF. Great appreciation. You're not just copying what you see. There's the colors that you put together. There's a rhyme and reason. They interact with each other. And I enjoy that. I really enjoy my paintings. Because the visual response our eyes get from complementary colors. Um, it's just when you add that to a painting, it just adds another layer of interest and investigation.
And are there artists from the past that inspire you?
Yeah, uh, my go-to who I learned a long time ago was John Singer Sargent's watercolors. I knew Sargent from his portraits. I didn't know his watercolors, and one day I saw some in a book. I was like, wow, these are amazing. Um, and his use of his use of different materials, his use of wax in his paintings. He painted alla prima and plein air on his days off on vacations. He did thousands of watercolors. They were so intense because he was an oil painter working with watercolors. So he was kind of breaking the rules, not doing a lot of pale washes. He was really laying it on. You can actually see impasto with his watercolors, where he was using so much paint with watercolor. Um, and that really transformed my watercolors from being these pale and correct watercolors with these uniform washes to more intense color and crazy texture, which is kind of difficult with some watercolor. And there's tons of blooms in these things. Uh, hopefully the watercolor looks like watercolor. Um, and Andrew Wyeth. Um, There was this amazing show last year of Wyeth, you know, uh, some unseen landscapes that he did over the course of his career that no one had ever seen. They were nuts. Technically, they were just stupendous. And if you had anyone who went to that show and knew watercolor, your jaw would drop because there was so much, give and take and lifting and pencil work, and he would go back in with rags and dry brushes, and it was just amazing. So that was, Wyeth. And of course, I mentioned Eileen Goodman. I just, her watercolors are amazing. Uh, and they're big, they're huge. Uh, but she still, they take some time to do because they're so big, but they're still so fresh and vivid. Uh, they're incredible.
I guess working alla prima, you're constrained a bit size-wise.
Well, I mean, for for me, I find this like 12 by 12 paper portable for me. Rexstraw Downs goes out with like huge canvases. I could do bigger, but I haven't tried that yet. This just seems to be portable for me because I tend to hike into places. Uh, I don't have any support staff to set things up for me and let me walk in and paint. I have to lug all this stuff in. So this is, anything smaller than this, it tends to get a little tight. And anything bigger, it gets a little awkward. So this just seems to be the right size from what I want to achieve.
So do you feel working this way like heightens your perception?
Yeah, oh, yeah, totally. When you're painting this way, when you're painting, you're always, on as far as observation. And, with watercolor, you're not always painting, you're letting the watercolor dry and settle sometimes. So while you're in place doing this, you're much more observant. You're really engaged with what you're looking at and where you're at. Um, uh, So, this is a process where I go in and paint, but when I'm painting, I'm actually taking the area, the space, the place I'm at in a deeper level. I really take, I mean, I see so much more now when I'm painting. Because these take about an hour, 2 hours tops. When because I'm quiet, I'm just sitting there. I see so much more. Things come out of the woodwork. Deer come out, birds come out. I hear things, that normally I wouldn't see. So you're like really engaged when you're working this way. And I think it's very different than working from, I've worked in photographs in the past, and that's great. I like doing this because it just gets me in the zone. I hate that term, but that's where I am at when I'm doing this. I really see things. And I tell my students, I encourage them to paint this way too, because if you're traveling, if you're someplace, when you paint, you're spending a time engaged with a space, with a place that you will never forget. A photograph will fade, you may lose it, your phone may die, but when you paint something, it's, not only do you have this end result, but it's in your head. You never forget it. It's like tattooed in your brain. So it's an experience.
So on Saturday, May 3rd, you're doing a workshop in conjunction with your show.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're gonna get a course from watercolor condensed and everything I've talked about. We're gonna talk about, working out prima, so you're working fast. We're talking about color. And you're not it's not necessarily a verbatim description of what you're looking at. Some people, they want to copy everything they see, and very often it's not, you don't need to have everything. I'm constantly telling my students to squint. They're sitting there, they're trying to copy everything. And without Prima, you don't have that. If you want fresh, clean watercolor, you can't overwork. You kind of have to do one and done. A big brush, some nice moves, and also just stopping, if you're spending 2 hours beavering away at painting, I would guess that you're probably going to be overworking and you're going to have a lot of dull color and you might be, belaboring things. So I'm going to encourage people to work fast, work loose, let some things go.
And when you talk about like tools and techniques and things like that,
Yeah, I wear look the brushes, wax, some people use Frisket or white. I use wax. Um,
as a
uh,
resist
as a resist, yeah, it comes in handy, it really does. But also the discipline of just reserving the white of the paper. Um, uh,
and the
and
kind of paper itself and stuff like
yeah,
that.
I use 140 pound cold press because it has a very rough texture to it. But I usually cover my classes, the different kinds of paper you can get. You can get hot press, which is very smooth. You can get very rough paper, which is handmade paper, which is very rough indeed. And there's different weights. 300-pound paper. Eileen Goodman uses a 300-pound paper, which is like cardboard. But she uses that because she doesn't have to stretch it. She can just move it around as she paints. So you're gonna knowing material and knowing paint. I tend to be a paint nerd, so I like pigments. So I do cover like some of the history of the paints I use, um, and some of the paints that we don't use anymore, like the paints that Sargent used, which are toxic or they're extinct, or we don't make them anymore because they're expensive. I like to go into the history of some of the pigments that we use.
And do people need any experience
No,
with water?
no, no. You can come off the street. I get people all the time coming in my classes who have no idea what's going on. Um, And the hardest part of that is talking them off the ledge, and it's gonna be okay. You're gonna make mistakes. It's not a mistake. You're learning. This takes some time. Uh, you know, uh, I've been painting for over 25 years, and it took me a long time to get to where I am today. But I have people in my class now that have taken my class for a couple semesters, and they're doing really well. You just have to knuckle down, pay attention, and just accept things. If you're too tight, if you worry too much, it's gonna go south on you. You have to learn how materials work, and that'll get you where you need to go.
Well, it's a great show, Keith.
Thank you.
And the show is up through May the 4th, and we hope people come down to see it. And everything's also available on our website, ceruleanarts.com. And you can also register for the workshop on the website, ceruleanarts.com, the studio page. And thanks so much for being here, Keith, and have a great night.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a good night.